anyone shows up. So we're broadcasting and we are recording. Everyone got quiet.
When you say we're broadcasting and we're recording, is it just audio or is it visual also? Is the screen being captured or?
Yep, the screen is being captured. So I think the way it works though is if you've watched any of these recordings, afterwards it shows the screen that I'm sharing. So it shows whatever I have projected up there, and it will show whoever is speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever's not speaking sort of disappears until they speak. It comes out pretty well. It's easy to sort of scroll through and find what you're looking for in a meeting. If you have to go back and re-listen to something, it's much easier than the old recordings, the old audio recordings.
Oh yeah, at least you'll be able to see what's up on the screen.
Right. Plus, you just had to listen and listen and listen, even if you wanted something further down.
Hey, I was in Salisbury the other day and I was looking across to the super sacks, and it looked like there's an elbow, like a little turn. Had the sacks caved in? Did anyone notice that, or was it just the way they were originally placed?
I saw a picture of that. Yeah, it looked like some of them had kind of fallen.
They did. Yeah, you saw correctly. They did fall. I was out there a few days ago. There's like a little section where it looks like they've tumbled down onto the sand. That's probably what you saw.
Yeah, that's what it looked like.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because they're so, I mean, I was looking at that, wondering how that was going to get sort of re-established where it was. It's not going to be very easy. I think it's just going to stay like that.
Yeah, I thought I imagine it got, hit pretty hard by the tide or the waves or something, and it moves them, I assume.
I actually think that that's not what happened, because when I was out there, I came at it from the roadside, and right where those bags tumbled down is where there's a really easy step up from the road onto the blocks, that first row of blocks. And it's sort of like an access point because you're walking along and everything's really high, and then it kind of like you can climb up, and then that's where the bags are rolled down. And I saw some footsteps on top of the sand. So I think people were climbing over them right there.
Right.
I think that's what happened.
So they're their own worst enemy.
Yep.
Yeah, but they're working in an amazing way. There's sand piled up behind them and in front of them.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So.
Well, maybe tomorrow night we'll find out for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that going to be a big one?
It was
It might be.
10.1 today.
Wave height?
I think it's 9.9 tomorrow morning and Thursday morning. Thursday night is not all that high.
Yeah.
8 something. So I don't know. Thursday morning could be the killer.
Yeah, most of the National Weather Service is not calling for any flooding in around the Merrimack, but everybody south of us has at least minor flooding going on. And
Yes. Supposedly the high pressure area above us will keep the bulk of the storm to the south, but not by much.
well, the last forecast I saw a little while ago was 8 to 12 for us.
Oh, geez, yeah.
I saw 10 to 15 at 4 o'clock.
Are you talking about inches of snow?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my
they're talking
gosh.
about a foot in New York City.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a pain.
Well, at least there won't be a snow day for the schools because they're working from home anyway.
There you
Right.
go.
That makes it easy. Okay.
We have Gretchen is here, so we may as well get this started.
Okay,
All right, let's bring this meeting to order. It's the December 15th, 2020 Newburyport Conservation Commission meeting taking place on the Zoom platform. This meeting is being recorded. First item on the agenda, the approval of the meeting minutes from November 17th, 2020. Do we have any changes or additions or anything?
Yeah, I had one comment. Under the Plum Island updates, the fourth sentence, it says crane would be needed to the super sacks. I think it was supposed to be needed to install the super sacks or something like that.
Anything else?
Nope.
motion to approve as amended?
Second,
All right. Paul Healy,
Yes,
Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes,
Ron DeCola.
Yes.
I vote yes. All right, next item, Plum Island updates.
There's an MRBA meeting this Friday, the 17th, at 11 a.m., I believe. We don't have a Zoom link for that yet or an agenda. But if anyone's interested, I will email that out to everybody once we get that information. It usually does come kind of late. I don't know, David, did you receive anything?
no, somehow I think I'm off the list or something. I'm not really.
Well, yeah, I didn't receive anything either, other than, oh, what's his name, Matt's last,
Which was a while ago, and I haven't received anything either. I know that it's on, still scheduled, because I talked to the mayor about it. She was speaking with him more recently, and they just haven't sent out the agenda and details yet.
okay. All right. So that's all we have for Plum Island. And how about next to the Colby Farm Lane landfill solar project? Did you have anything, Julie, or?
Is anyone here for that? That was put on the agenda at the request of the, why don't I have that on this agenda? Sorry. This one didn't get updated. That was put on the agenda at the request of the Blue Wave folks who are working on the landfill project for the solar panels at the landfill. And they have made some slight, or they would like to make some modifications to the stormwater basins, not really changing the design at all, but really just repairing some things and replacing some pieces of equipment. So they wanted to give the commission an update on that because they're located within the buffer zone. But they're not here for this to speak. So I will get in touch with them, and it's possible that they maybe thought they were coming to the next meeting. So in any case, we can move on.
Okay. We are going to move the Evergreen discussion to the end because that which is in between is pretty short. So may as well get those taken care of first. Next item is Michael F. Riley and Lorraine K. Riley, 2 Spofford Street, request for a certificate of compliance.
Is anyone here for that project? Okay. That makes sense because we are still waiting for additional information from them. I believe I sent you in my notes that we are still waiting for photographs. We're waiting for a letter from their engineer stating what the project compliance is with the approved plans. What they gave us was the form and an as-built plan, but no additional information as were required in the order of conditions. So we're just still waiting for that information. So this was on the agenda, but then we didn't get what we asked for. So we can just continue this to the next meeting.
Okay. So we get a motion.
Motion to continue this to the next meeting.
Second,
And that would be January 5th, it looks like.
Yep.
Okay, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall. Dan says yes. David Vine,
yes.
Ron DeCola,
Yes.
I vote yes. And next item is Joseph Hill, care of Lisa Mead, etc., 2 Parker Street, request for extension.
Yes, this is just a simple request for an extension. They have not had time to finish the work under the 3 years and have additional work to do out there, as you can read in the letter from Mead, Tellerman and Costa. And they just are requesting a simple extension.
Lisa does have her hand up, by the way.
Oh, okay, let me get you here. All right, Lisa, go for it.
Julia, you were doing a great job. So we're just looking for an extension for 3 years. We're just over halfway done. So we need an extension to complete the project.
Anyone motion that?
Make a motion to give a 3-year extension to this project.
Second.
All right, Paul Healy,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
David Vine,
Yes,
Ron DeCola,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Well, that didn't take long to get back to Evergreen. All right. This is mostly an informal discussion with Evergreen Commons Workplace.
Tom, I've unmuted you. If you want to, and I'm
Yeah.
going to also promote you both to panelists so that we can see you when you're speaking. Okay.
Julia, can you unmute Steve too, please?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
And Steve.
And where did Tom go? Tom went away.
I'm here now. No, when you promote me, you disconnect me for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. All right.
And Steve Sawyer and Lisa Mead and Howard Hall are all
Okay.
also here, I believe. I can't see who's attending.
Let's see. I've got.
Don't see Howard unless he's under a different name.
Okay, well then if you can, oh, he had another meeting in West Newbury, I think, that he had to be at first. So he may show up. Okay, so we're here tonight. We wanted to just come in. It's been a long time since we've been in front of you guys and give you an update on where things are and go through a number of things that we're going to be looking to come in for an amendment to the permit at one of the upcoming meetings. What I'd like to do is kind of start out. I'll go through kind of the status of the open space, some of the space related changes that we'll be coming into you with, go over the draft signage sheets that we've submitted, and then turn it over to Steve to talk about some of the engineering things. And then from Steve, go over to Lisa to talk about things like the conservation restriction and a few other.
Just to let you know, I
things
have
in there, and
all
then
of
we
the
can-
documents that you submitted. I have available to share on the screen. So just let me know what you want me to project.
Yeah, why don't we start with the photos?
Okay. Let's see if I can find those.
Okay, so
Here we go.
actually, on that, why don't we start on that sign, the first page of the sign thing, because it gives a nice overview of the site. Okay, next one down. You had one,
Oh, sorry, this.
Yep. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So just to remind you guys of the site, I'm not sure how many of you have frequented through there since it's been under construction, but we have 3 open space parcels. There's the large one off to the west, which includes the wetlands. and pollinator meadows and a tot lot and a walking trail system. There is also the parade ground, which is kind of that oval area, which is a large lawn area with kind of a patio and a fireplace in it. And then up on the eastern side of the property, there is some open space behind the homes, which is really just sort of green space that separates the developed area from the city's property that contains the well. And I believe that little semicircle is property that goes to the city, part of the, I think that's the Zone 1 area.
Yes.
Okay, so let's flip down, because I think the most important part of the open space as far as the commission is concerned is the creation of the wetlands and the trails and all that. So why don't we flip down to the 2 photo sheets. Okay, so why don't we start there? You may recall we have a crossing through the wetland. So the bridge or bridges have finally just been installed. We had a couple challenges with how wet the wetland was and the ability to get in there to do the work for a little bit. But now it's been done. And if you take a look at the sheets, you can kind of see there's a picture. The upper left is a picture I took from the island that's in the middle of the wetland looking out back at the development. The picture in the middle upper part, you may have to zoom in to see it, but I'm standing on the trail network looking at the wetland, and the bridge is kind of, yeah, right up in there going across to the island. The picture in the upper right, I'm standing on the first section of bridge from the development side, the eastern bridge, and looking in the wetland to the north. And you can see the low marsh area where there's standing water and the higher marsh area where there's a bunch of cattails. If you look in the lower left, I'm same location looking south. Again, you can kind of see the channel in the middle, and you can see the, which is the low marsh, and you can see the high marsh areas off to the right. Then in the middle bottom, I'm looking towards the island. So in the island, we basically have the stone dust path goes out, and then you can sort of see it there. There's sort of like a little gathering spot circle that the path flares out into, and then it goes back out over the next bridge. And then in the lower right, I'm standing in the middle of the pollinator meadow looking out towards the bridge. Everything.
Is that the one, let me just point out that isn't the pollinator meadow behind you on your screensaver tonight, behind you, your background?
Actually, that is the buffer zone to the wetland, and actually
Okay,
the
sorry.
wetlands behind me.
Right.
More like what it looks like in the summer. It's not all tan.
Right.
Tom, you said you had trouble because the wetlands were so wet. Given that we're just barely emerging from a drought.
Well, until the drought. Yeah, no, this summer we did finally have the conditions. I mean, you could walk this summer, you were able to walk out onto the island without a bridge.
Right.
The soil was still had hydrology. The soils were saturated enough to support a wetland community. And the goal here was to produce a resilient wetland that actually was a wetland during drought periods as well as during wet periods. And if you remember what was there before, the golf course sort of wetland that was down that area would have been lawn-like in the kind of weather we just had. So I was actually really happy the fact that we didn't have, ground dry and cracking in the middle of the wetland in a drought. So we did get that proper interface with the groundwater elevations. One of the things Steve will talk about it, I think a little bit later, that happened with the wetland system is when we had to build the pump station and the sewer connection, part of that work was well down into the water table. So there was a huge dewatering effort that occurred, and something along the lines of, multiple 100-year events occurred in terms of water being put into the system that ended up, because it's a bowl and it all ends up in the bottom, it all ended up down there, and it resulted in a slightly elevated condition in the water for the first year. Things seem to even out even before the drought this year. But at that point, we were trying to figure out, do we put in swamp matting? We were trying to come up with a construction technique to kind of get out in the wetland. And then the water fell out from under us with the drought and made it perfect conditions. So last year it was too wet because of that dewatering effort. And this year the water kind of fell out from under us and got us there. And before that, the site really wasn't in a condition where we could start putting in bridges and trails because we were still working on the open space. So anyhow, so we've now got the bridges intact. They're actually quite popular, being walked quite a bit. I don't know how many of you guys have been out there and walked the site at all, but it's a nice walk. I have to do it every Friday as part of the stormwater inspection protocols. So I don't know what happened to your screen share, Julia.
Julia, you're
Julie, did you
muted.
just switch me to the host?
Yeah, I don't know why I just lost internet connection for a minute. Everything froze and I had to reset my internet connection. Let me just reshare my screen.
Yeah, it's Comcast getting ready for the storm.
You think?
They're
How's that?
testing the, yeah, that's
That's
perfect.
better.
Yeah, they're testing the ability to kill our internet. Okay, so let's go to the next.
Before you go on, this question might be out, not at this time, but what was a bridge was eliminated?
Yeah, so one of the things in the discussions last year, we were walking the site with some city folks. I think Julia and Jennifer were there. I can't remember if John Eric was there. And we were kind of walking the trail network. And on paper, when we drew these things, it looked like we were going to have these two bridge systems that were going to be pretty far apart, and it would make a lot of sense. And when you're down there on the ground, it just didn't really seem to make sense to have two different crossings over the wetland. It seemed to make a lot more sense just to have this one out to the island and then one out. And the trail network seems to work really well with just that one bridge. It just kind of seemed a little much. And we had really just had the other bridge in that location because the golf course had a bridge at that location.
Yeah, it seemed like overkill. It just wasn't necessary.
Chip is here. He has joined us.
Okay,
believe.
I'll bring him in.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So it was really a matter of, why have that additional wetland impact when it just seems like it converts it from a nice kind of conservation trail to sort of more of a developed wetland. And we don't really want that developed wetland. We want it to sort of be a conservation trail where people get access, get to see the interior of the wetland through a bridge. But we really don't need to have all these bridges kind of everywhere. That was the sort of reasoning there. I don't know, did that answer the question?
Yeah, I was more curious about it, and I was more curious if anything was impacted because of that. I mean, if anything was lost, but it doesn't sound like anything, any help to the wetland was lost.
No, in fact, we eliminate, some number of square footage of buffer zone stone dust trail that would have connected from the loop trail into the bridge, and we lose the bridge impact. So if anything, we have a healthier buffer and a healthier wetland.
Okay.
If we can jump to the next sheet. Okay, so this is more of kind of what you see during the growing season. The most mature pollinator plants are actually in the 25-foot buffer. That conservation mix took really well when we did our first round of seeding out here. One of the problems we had in the pollinator meadow is that pollinator plants are generally very slow growing, and the soil that we spread out there, the loam, came from a golf course, and it had all kinds of live root material that ended up taking off. So we had golf turf coming in and amongst the pollinators. So This year, we totally redid it. We went out and raked it all up, got rid of all the old that had come back in and the crabgrass, and we reseeded it again. So this year, what you see when you look at the pollinator meadow are those things that the seed folks put into the pollinator mix, the fescues that they put in to have something take fairly quickly. And you also see some oats that we put in. Since it's a spring seed, we add in oat. If we did it in the fall, we would add in rye. It has the same effect. It's an annual, helps break up the soil and all that. But in the upper left, there's a pollinator. That picture is actually taken on site during one of my site inspections. All these photos that you see here are from the site. The picture in the upper middle is taken from the northern end of the IVW, kind of looking out into the IVW. You can kind of see the low marsh channel in the middle, and you can see the higher marsh areas off to the side. The picture on the upper right might even be the one that's behind me. No, not quite, but it's same rough area. It's taken from the eastern side of the VW, looking towards the highway in the background in the west. The bottom left is a picture of the stormwater wetland with the development in the background. That's actually looking towards the discharge pipe that takes the treated stormwater into the swale-like feature that brings the water into the IVW. The picture in the bottom middle is just a picture I took of one of the rain gardens right after a rainfall where it filled up with water. These things have been working pretty well. They, this thing, if you came back a day or two later, all that water is infiltrated or gone through. There's a discharge pipe at the end that then goes into the stormwater wetland, so that if that rain garden B receives too much water, then it overflows into the stormwater wetland, I believe. And the bottom right is another picture of the IVW. That's actually from the western side of the IVW up, I think kind of near the northwestern end of it, kind of looking down towards the homes. So the open space is really looking nice and green. I mean, if you went out there now, it's shades of brown and khaki, but it's looking really good. I'm expecting with this spring and this, especially as we get into June, we're going to really start seeing the wildflowers start to come in the pollinator meadow. So you won't just see the fringes of yellow around the wetland. You're going to start really seeing the pollinators pop. There are a few, little areas, and I'm talking, 50, 100 square foot areas here and there within the open space where we're going to, touch up and seed. We're actually looking at doing a dormant seed if we get this snow melt, so that the seed is right on the ground when the soil warms up, so those areas clean up. But we've got acres and acres and acres of open space where it's coming beautifully, and we're just we just got a few spots to deal with. The trail network is all in. There's a couple of touch-ups again on that in the spring, but it's in great shape. You can walk all the way from the trailhead at the end of Boyd Drive all the way through into a loop and come out on Brown through the sidewalk system. You can walk through the neighborhood and get to the larger city trail network right now. It's really pretty, fairly pretty site, and in the, it's one of those things where you kind of walk around. It's pretty satisfying walking this open space when I'm doing my inspections, knowing what it was and what it's become. During construction on the wetland, one of the things you may recall is we committed to continue to monitor the water levels during construction. As a result of that work, we adjusted the bottom of the wetland up by about 6 inches because we had groundwater that was a little bit higher than we had in our prior monitoring. That worked out really well. The result of that, though, is that we probably created about a quarter of an acre more wetland than what we told you guys we were going to create. I would say at least a quarter acre more. There may be closer to half an acre. We'll be actually doing a flagged as-built of that wetland now that it's pretty stable and I can determine what the actual edge of hydrology and wetland is on it. But it's bigger than we said. It's pretty nice. You know, I definitely would invite you guys to come out and see it, especially, you know, once we get snow melt after the storm, come out and take a walk out there. It's really pretty.
Tom, do you have the trail connection to the Garrison Trail? Is that in place?
So
Not yet.
one of the challenges that we've faced, we had looked to make the trail connection up the slope and connect to it as it goes by highway. Is that if we do that, we're required to make it ADA. And we've got too much of a slope there. So we haven't been able to figure out a way to do that. It's been one of the challenges. If you want to connect directly to the public trail network, you get hit with that. And in fact, we had an accessibility on our trail layout. One of the changes we're going to be coming in with you is we had, when you came off the sidewalk coming in from Brown Ave, we had an entrance to the trail that kind of split in two different directions coming down the hill. And we had to eliminate that, go further along on the sidewalk and then cut back along the grade to get a flat trail for accessibility issues. So yeah, that's been a problem. And I don't know, Lisa, if you have anything to add about the issues with connecting to.
Yeah, Steve, I would say to you, obviously, before that is done, you can get onto the Garrison from Brown Ave or Loring up there and cross over on Ferry Road and cross right over and get onto the Garrison. There's a connection right there. In fact, I ride the Garrison in the good weather with my daughter almost every day. And there's a lot of people that come down that connection onto the Garrison from Ferry Road. So you can do that. We are working and looking right now about how to do the connection up over the embankment to the Garrison directly, because that's part of the planning board approval. So it hasn't been done yet for the reasons that Tom said, but you can get to the Garrison if you walk through the trail network and up Brown or Loring and then over.
The reason I mention it is because in the planning board's wisdom, there's essentially no public parking in the development. There's no room
Right.
for it. I think there should have been, but it's outside of our jurisdiction. So, you know, direct public's access to the property, that connection is the only one. You know, if you'd get on up at the park and ride and walk down and be able to get in and walk around. Since there's no, yeah, I suppose you could park on Brown Ave or at the end of Boyd Drive. I think it's really important to have that connection, especially since you mentioned it specifically in the conservation restriction.
Right, and that's why it's in there. We're working on it. We just haven't, it hasn't been figured out yet. So obviously it's not off the table because it's part of all the permits.
Right.
But my point was, like, you can get to the Garrison from here still. In fact, I've gone from the Garrison over to here through that other connection.
Has the state agreed that you can do that?
Not
Have
yet.
they?
We don't have that authorization yet.
Okay.
So maybe.
Yeah,
you go to
and-
comments, Tom.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like it too. I mean, this is a development I'm proud of. I like walking the trails, and you know, right now while it's under construction, I've got a reason to come in, park, you know, pretty much wherever I can fit the truck and walk all the time. But I won't have that opportunity when all the lots are sold and all the homes are occupied, you know, without that access. But as Lisa mentioned, it's only a block and a half, you know, from the trail network through the, you know, through public sidewalks and streets. And so you can get there, you know, but it would be nice to be able to park it, you know, park the and ride and have closer access. I would agree with you, but we're doing what we
Yeah.
can.
So I actually had reached out to MassDOT
Oh, sorry.
on this connection, and basically what they relayed to me, it had to be an 8-foot wide paved connection, and fully ADA accessible, to be allowed to make that connection. But I will revisit it. Maybe they would make some adjustments to that, that requirement.
Well, they made an exception down at Amesbury, as you know, to that connection, obviously with those stairs. So we're not this, it's not something we haven't focused on. We've been trying to get all this stuff together first. It's something that has to be looked at and followed up on. So Steve, it's certainly not off the table at all. It's just not, we haven't gotten there yet. Steve, how's that? Do you want to go to the signs, Tom?
Yeah, so as part of our conservation approval, you may recall, we committed to doing a bunch of educational signs out there, and some other signage to mark various parts of the open space. So now, Julie, if we can go back to the map one. Yeah.
But first, Tom, before we get there, since we're leaving what you were just on, you mentioned that wetland is bigger than you had planned. Can you just explain that a little bit more? Is it because it was over excavated and the groundwater has sort of taken it and filled it up? Or is it because there's just more water in the system and it went to a wider area?
Well, it's because when we planned and we told you how much wetland we were going to create, we had estimated a groundwater interface that was about 6 inches lower than what we observed. So if you raise that up 6 inches, and then you figure, the slope, you're basically expanding your wetland by a few feet around a pretty massive perimeter. There's another element that I think Steve was going to mention, but around 2017-ish, the Park and Ride also put a really big, or Highway put a big stormwater basin up at the northern end of their expanded parking lot. And we think that may have slightly influenced the groundwater gradient in that area coming into where the stormwater wetland is. And the stormwater wetland then connects through that swale into the IVW. We have noticed the IVW elevation tends to be higher than that small pond. The small pond is a true representation of the groundwater at that location. It's not lined, it has no organic muck. It's, it's a pure sand interface in with the groundwater elevation. So we think what's happening is we think that there's a little bit of an increased gradient from that stormwater system that is combined, and that may have accounted for the reason we saw the slightly higher
water levels
during the monitoring.
Yeah. So I guess my question is then, how does that, and does that at all also affect the extent of the isolated land subject to flooding?
So
So the bottom floor, if you picture the ILSF having a bottom to it, is set at an elevation above the wetland surface water.
Actually, Julia, so I can chime in here.
Okay,
So we were pretty conservative on that. We said, okay, let's take a conservative number we take 0 credit. Granted, okay, during certain times, there is volume there. It's below the water elevation, but we actually set elevation 52. 52 as that elevation. And I would say for the most part, I think maybe on one occasion, it was right after they did all that pumping, the elevation was elevated for a little while, but after about a month or so, it for the most part, it stays below elevation 52. And I believe that we've had a fairly rainy, this rainy spell, even with this rainy spell, Tom, I think you've been out there weekly. I believe it's not gone above. It's settled to stood at elevation 52 or lower. So really, it has no impact on as far as the capable storage.
Yep. Okay. And I remember we went through this earlier. I was just curious. I wanted to ask again because Tom mentioned that the wetland was larger than was planned, and I was just wondering if that did he mean the wetland and the ILSF, or just the wetland boundaries? Because I think it was before, when this is in the planning stages, the wetland, the IBW had a distinct boundary, and the ILSF was much larger than that boundary. But now they almost look like they're in the same spot.
Oh, no, the
No, no,
ILSF is much bigger. Yeah.
Oh, the ILSF boundary is massively larger.
Much, right, but so the elevation 52 is the water level in the IBW right now, correct?
No, it's generally below 52.
The high water level in last spring, didn't we determine that was at elevation 52?
It was just about at 52, and that was right after the winter pumping of
And
mass.
that's, and I get, so Steve, you're saying that's the bottom elevation.
That's the bottom. Yeah, we take no credit. Yeah, so, you're okay, if the elevation of the water was 53, 54, yeah, we'd have to think about it, okay.
So if it went up to, if it was higher than 52, then we'd have to think about the extent of the ILSF, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it on a regular basis, but if we get a 6-inch rainstorm and it goes up to 53, then the ILSF is functioning, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Even after a 2-inch rainstorm, you would expect it to, even if you had 2 inches of rain or so, you would expect it to rise above 52 and then slowly settle back.
We just don't want its it to be consistently, we don't want its baseline to be above 52. We want it to be, we want it to go above 52 during the storm, but we don't want it to be there.
No, and and the baseline has been reliably below 52 out there. And the other thing that has resulted in a larger wetland is the organic soil that's used in the open space is actually better quality than I would have expected. And it's actually through capillary action, kind of drawing some of the wetland slope off to the side. So it's not standing water wetland, but it is wicking some of the water. So we get like maybe 2 to 3 feet just from the 6-inch lift, but then we get maybe in some places an additional, maybe even up to 10 feet where it's just kind of wicking water out. So it'll be interesting when we do our final numbers, but we will have significant more wetland produced, and I'm really happy with the quality of the wetland too. So anyhow, if we can take a look at the map here, what you can see is, first of all, we've got some of the signs right on here, but there was an educational sign going in on the island. There's for the IVW, an educational sign off in the field kind of to the right, to the east of that, which is a pollinator meadow educational sign. I think it's, you'd have to zoom in a bit, but it's somewhere in that area of that pond. Yeah, that little, what is it? 5-sided
triangle thing, right?
Yeah.
Pentagon? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So then there's another one over by the stormwater wetland, and that was for stormwater wetland. If you kind of just go down a little bit.
Other way.
The other down.
Yep. Yeah, right there. So you can see near where we were going to connect to the trail, we have a stormwater wetland educational sign. Then there's an entry sign you can kind of see right there where the trail kind of enters in from Duffy there. And then you see all those squares, those are bounds. And then on the bounds, we have conservation area signs on there. So if we can go in the upper left or over to the left here. So let's go up to the very top.
Okay.
Right there. So the Port Place Conservation Area, that's our proposed marker to go on those posts. So at the back of everybody's yards and, along the edge of the open space, there will be those markers clearly, demarcating the conservation area. So now the next one is the entrance. So at the trailhead locations, basically carry in, carry out, clean up after your pets, no cutting vegetation, et cetera. Pretty simple, low key, but visible. And then along the no disturb, you see the triangles. Basically, we're going to be putting the wetland no disturb zone signs up.
Up on the entering sign
Yep,
down at the bottom where it says Port Place HOA.
yep.
I don't think most people are going to know what HOA is.
You want it to spelled out, Steve? You want it to say homeowner association?
Well, no, that would take up too much space, but I get, well, if there was room below Port Place to say homeowners association, yeah, I guess.
All right, we'll take a look at it. Maybe it'll just be smaller font, that Port Place HOA.
Okay.
Do you all want to, this just occurred to me. I mean, I don't have much commentary about these signs other than now I'm wondering if we want to make it clear that it's a water supply protection area as well, that the no dumping, etc., clean up after your pets. I mean, there's different reasons for different rules out there, but overall, people need to know that it's also water supply protection. What does everyone think about that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you put that under
Yeah.
like the no cutting of vegetation
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Somewhere on that sign to make it clear that there's the bigger reason, like an important reason why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe underneath conservation area, just say water, also,
Yeah,
and water, water supply protection.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that would be good.
I'm
Okay.
curious, does the city have road signs where people leave it? Because it seems like it would be a good idea to do, just,
Oh, throughout our water supply areas?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, well, you're right. It does seem like a good idea. Actually, we're working on a water supply protection plan right now.
because people are already in it when they enter this, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so you almost don't want them to think that this is the only place where it exists. I mean,
No, well, that's a good point too.
But-
Yeah, I mean,
but we can look at adding some language like that.
Well, I'd like to know what the pleasure of the board is, because we would like to start production of all these signs so that we can get them put up. So is it the pleasure of the board to say entering Port Place Conservation Area and Water Conservation Area? Or water supply protection area?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
so when you say entering the water supply protection area, then it sounds like where
Yeah.
you were coming from wasn't. And I think that Tom made a good point about that. The whole
So maybe you
area.
wanna you want to list it under the no cutting of vegetation?
Entering Port Place Conservation Area, no dumping, but clean, no cutting of vegetation.
How about keeping this area clean protects your water supply?
Well, you're gonna have to make the sign like 24 by 24.
No, I'm saying get rid of where it says, please keep area clean. Thank you. Say something like, keeping this area clean protects your water supply.
Yeah, or like we've done a bunch of signage for the city and it always goes over better. There've been studies about how signs are interpreted. And rather than saying no dumping, no this, no that, it's always better to say, please do this, like a positive thing. So please help protect our public water supply. No dumping, carrying, la, 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 something like that.
So
Okay,
my
so so long as we work in, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Joe.
I did just to Tom's earlier comment where, it says entering Port Place Conservation Area, where you're already in it. Do we have to have entering there and just say Port Place Conservation and Water Protection Area?
Oh,
There you go.
And those signs can be put anywhere along the perimeter.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually have, on the plan, you can see we have, I think 3 or 4 designated places for them where the trails come in from the sidewalk. My point was you're not entering the water protection area. You are entering the conservation area.
Right,
So,
right. So I
but-
think just as long as it says somewhere in there, please help protect our public water supply.
right.
So how about we do this? After we get through all these signs, if there are any changes like this, if the board's okay with the signs, we can get your assent to go forward, but have Julia review the last draft of them. How's that?
That's fine. I like Joe's idea of removing entering,
Yeah, I
and
think
saying
that's,
Fort Place Conservation Area, municipal water supply. And then,
yeah,
I agree. I was thinking the exact same thing, Joe. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
All
just
right.
remove entering.
yep.
right.
Gives you
Yeah, but
another
don't-
line for homeowners association.
We just
Yeah,
don't want
good
people
point.
drinking the water in the wetland.
Okay, we'll do that and get them back, get that one
Okay.
back. Okay,
Okay,
Um,
so the next one down's really straightforward. So I think we just looked at that, the wetland no disturb. You know, we tried to keep it conservation like. Any issues with that? Anybody? We good with?
how high are the posts going to be that these go on? I'm wondering in relationship to how high the plants are going to be.
Well, they're right inside the path, so they should be fairly visible. And in that area, you know, we hadn't really talked about how high up they were going to be, but I would think, you know, 2 to 3 feet above the ground would probably be about right. Might get slightly obscured by, you know, some vegetation in front, but you know, I think the plan is we have most strips kind of along the path, I think, if I remember right from the project plans. Steve, do you remember, do we have like a
Yeah, we have
along
a mowed edge, so against the.
like 5 feet or something like that?
Yeah.
we put them in the mowed edge, Steve, Mr. Moore, we have two Steves here. We'd put them in the mowed edge so that they wouldn't be obscured by the growth.
Okay,
Okay. Otherwise, you'd have to put orange flags on them.
Right?
We can do that. I'm used to putting orange flags on things. Okay, so we'll just adjust those locations. They'll be no closer to the wetland than shown on the current plan, but maybe a little further out. Never hurts to have a bigger no disturb zone, right? Okay, so now we should probably move to the educational ones. Okay, so you may want to zoom in, but so this is the IVW one. Those photos again are of the property.
what do you mean by restoration and creation area?
Well, so we didn't just create a wetland, right? We started with a wetland that was sort of a wetland that was part of the golf course. It was an ordinance only isolated wetland and we restored that, and then we created more wetland. So it's both. We did some wetland restoration in that we took an existing wetland and we made it better. And then we created wetland. So it's, I don't know, I was trying to be true to what we did.
Okay.
Folks good with this?
Yeah, so have you guys had a chance to read through these and any wordsmithing or additional information you wanted to convey? We tried to keep it fairly short so that somebody might stop and read these. We're picturing these kind of put, sort of like a lectern style, at a slight angle on the top of a post.
Mhm.
Similar to the other interpretive signs that are around town.
Right.
that was my one question really, was how are they going to be mounted? Because I think that actually what you just said is a great idea, to have them at that angle where they look like they're inviting to come, read it. A little bit more formal and associated with education. I thought they were great. I like your exclamation points. It makes it very user friendly.
trying to make it exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
no,
the
that was good.
intent is to make them informative, like the interpretive signs down, or, all the new ones that like Jordy's putting around, Julia. Yeah.
One question I have is there any way, and I know there's a lot of pictures on there and everything, to put some sort of a "you are here" map or at some other place so they know what the area that's encompassed by the isolated vegetated wetland or the
Yeah,
Kind of like a locust.
kind of like a something so people know this is I guess it's going to be in front of it, I guess, but just kind of a general location sort of thing so people can get an idea of.
In case they get lost.
That up in the right-hand corner, Steve.
Yeah,
so-
maybe just a quick little, like a little inset in the upper right.
Yeah, they're big enough maps. It doesn't need to be, or big enough signs. Doesn't need to be much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we started looking at doing that, and one of the problems was the map to use is that trail map, and since the trail was changing as a result of the access stuff, it was just a little too complicated to worry about doing it at the time, but I think that's fine. We could do that.
Okay.
Like in the isolated vegetated wetland one, that do you definitely need that bottom right picture? And could you just replace it with a little map? I don't know.
Well, you shouldn't need any pictures. You should just be able to look up, but we're just trying to, when we
Oh,
say
no,
we're talking-
I like the pictures there. It's just, it's almost a little redundant, having that other really nice picture to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Tom, you could put something even a little bit more educational in there, either a map or, because like you said, they're standing right there looking at it. So pictures are great because it makes the sign better, easier to look at. But if you did something like that showed what nutrient cycle, or so it's really educational, or picture of what a duck or something like the wildlife habitat function of an egret or heron.
Okay. And by the way, we have had families of ducks. We've had ducklings born since the development started, and they've been raised there. Last week I was out there and there was a hawk sitting on the railing of the bridge. And we have had a coyote that's been there since we started work. And
Trying to chase us away.
Yeah, all its friends are over there too. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So we'll change this up a little bit and get it back to Julia.
Okay.
All right. What about the next one there, Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, Julia's got it.
All right, so this pollinator meadow, I think the monarch picture may be the only one not from this site, but all the others are from the site. And that one, I've definitely seen monarchs out there. I just didn't get a decent picture of one. So, same thing. We tried to keep it so it just kind of gave some quick education about it. And talked about the open space and, how much of that is pollinator meadows, and that not only the pollinator meadow, but also the buffer conservation seed mix also provides pollinator habitat.
So my issue with this one was that all the flowers are yellow.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all that came in because it's a conservation mix. It doesn't have as diverse a group. We can swap out for a stock photo. I just was kind of hoping to have.
No, I understand, but, and the other thing, your picture of the monarch, if you could get one that was on a milkweed, A, you'd get a different color flower.
Okay.
And B, that's their primary source of food is a milkweed.
Yep. No, that's a good point.
And then you've got two black-eyed Susans. So.
Yep, we do. Although they're different varietals.
I was just ready to say they're different flowers.
Yeah. No, it's actually really striking how many different sort of varietals of the black-eyed Susan are on this site. It's actually kind of cool. But No, we can, we'll look for a couple different colors to swap out.
Yeah, I mean, pick something
a
that's
couple
gonna
of those
come up in the
pictures.
spring that's in the mix that you've got, you know.
Yeah.
You don't need to get some Midwestern thing, but
Well, no, we can, I've done other pollinator meadows. I'll have pictures I can use. I just, you know, it's nice to have pictures that you can say are actually right from that site, which, you know, which these are, with the exception of the monarch. And I do have a picture of monarch. It's just blurry. So didn't use it.
So we'll change that up and run that one by Julia. And then I think the last one, Julia.
Yes, so again, same thing. I mean, Steve did a lot of this one, but those are pictures of our stormwater wetland in here. With some nice factoids about stormwater wetlands.
Great pictures.
I was wondering if it would be possible, and I don't know that it is, to have a sign that talks about the history of the area. You know, the fact that it was a gravel pit, then a golf course, so that you can see the transition from, you know, an environmental disaster being a gravel pit to a golf course, which wasn't so bad, to what we've got. I don't know if there are any pictures anywhere. Maybe the Daily News has some of the gravel pit. And
I might, you know, the Keowns are still around, obviously, and it was their predecessors in interest, so to speak, and family members a couple of generations ago that had the gravel pit. So if we can't find any from the Daily News, we might be able to find some, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, we might be able to do an aerial timeline. That, I mean, I can get historic aerials going back to 1938. So we could,
definitely have aerials because we use them obviously in the permitting process. So we have aerials, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Where would
But-
you want, Steve Moore, where would you want that sign to be located?
well, probably at one of the entrances, you know, an entrance that in theory would be the one that got most used, which might be the one from the garrison or one from within the development itself.
Okay. Let us see if we can find something and then kind of look at a good location, and then we'll run that one back by all of you because it's not been
Yeah.
developed yet.
Yeah, the
And
couple,
it
yeah,
would be nice if somehow or other the city got mentioned as its part in developing, you know, allowing this development, you know, the commission and the planning board. You know, it was a long and tedious process.
Oh,
But
come on.
Jeff, you okay?
Well, no, I mean, you know, we can be,
Yeah.
you know, we can give a plug, you know, we can
Huh.
give a plug to the OSRD, right? I
Yeah,
mean, because this is actually you know, this is actually an example of what an OSRD is supposed to be with
Yeah.
lid, you know, we've got lid techniques in here. And, you know, obviously all of this, all of the wetlands and whatnot. So
yeah, so mention all of that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't
Okay.
thought of that. But
yeah,
we need a side of a building, Steve.
yeah.
right, I know.
Maybe
Maybe
a
we
nice-
could-
a nice spot for that one could be around the oval open space, since it's got, you know, it just has to do with the whole development in the whole area as opposed to the wetland areas.
Yeah.
But
A couple there's a couple
Well-
places, you know, so one is coming down off of, when you come the entry off of Brown, you're up high and there's sort of a nice view over the entire site.
Hmm.
We managed to get if we do get our connection, maybe coming in from the garrison, when you're coming down, looking at the site, you kind of get a view of the, you know, you get a view of the entire parcel.
yeah,
Yeah, I will say, you know, as far as OSRDs, I've done a fair amount. And as far as usable open space, this is definitely the marquee that I've been involved with.
Yeah, there isn't, you know, I've done these, my former partner, Mark, we've done these all over the Commonwealth, and really the end result and the usable open space and the environmental work that's done on this, there's not anything to compare it to. So I think your idea is good, Steve Moore. We'll talk to Chip about it, but I don't know that there's any reason why that shouldn't happen.
Okay. So, yeah, so we will look to finalize these signs. One question, the "you are here" part, do you want that on each of these or just on that one that we talked about?
Well, these are, I'll back off on the "you are here" thing.
Okay.
If they're gonna be right out in front of, it's just gonna be one, it's gonna be one sign out in front of whatever spot.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so, you know, maybe on, if we do the history one, maybe we can tuck in like a little trail map on it or something. Okay. All right, so I think we're good on the signs with a couple minor changes that we can run by Julia. The one we can work on and we'll present to you at a future meeting. You know, we'll have to work with Chip and the team on kind of where that would go. So I think now let me turn it over to Steve to talk about the engineering, the as-built and all that kind of stuff. Steve?
Before you do that, Tom, well, maybe it's a good time to get Steve's plan up, because it goes to the entranceway that we needed to adjust on the trail. I guess it's not on there.
No,
So-
actually, if we went back to the sign one, we can point at that real quick.
Okay.
Okay, if you go up a little bit, Julia. Yeah, okay, a little bit. Okay, right at the very top of, right there, you see that triangle? We had this place where you come down the sidewalk from Brown, you reach kind of that top of the hill, and right where it starts to become manageable, you enter into the trail network right there. You can go right to go behind, you can go left. It was kind of a nice little setup. But then that turned into be an access issue that we were required to address. And what has happened is we've gotten rid of those two. And instead, we kind of come off of that arc at a kind of at a tangent to kind of run along the contour over towards the sidewalk, kind of running more to the south. So
Okay,
start on the trail and then move to your right.
like over here?
Yeah, so we end up, if you can picture, we have to stay roughly at the same grade. So we're kind of running, and it's a little bit longer, so it runs further along. Now, the end result of that is we've had people, you know, now taking shortcuts, but we did have this requirement to make that an accessible entrance. So we've had to change that. You can see where the other bridge would have gone, kind of at that narrow point. So that's the bridge we're saying, you know, at this point, we don't think it's a great idea to build it. It seems unnecessary. We get rid of some of that pathway that was going to be in the no disturb zone. And we get rid of the structure in the wetland because you don't walk too much further and there's, you know, a bridge out to an island with a bridge on the other side. And it really is kind of creates a nice mini loop for somebody who wants to come in on Brown and do kind of a quick walk. And it also creates kind of an interesting figure eight for people who want to do a longer walk. So I like it a lot the way it is. And if you guys can figure out where to park and go for a walk there, I definitely recommend you do it.
So Steve, then we'll turn over. Thank you, Tom. I just didn't want to skip over those two parts of the amendment that we're going to file.
Right. Okay.
All right. All right, so as far as the stormwater systems, right now, they're all constructed and functioning. The constructed stormwater wetland along 95 that handles all of Boyd Drive and the overflow from our first rain garden is it's 100% operate, 100% functioning and vegetated and all working just as designed. I think the water is a little bit higher there, a little bit more water, which really is not an issue as far as the functioning portion of it. So that is all set and up and running. Now we have 5 rain gardens. So the first rain garden was it was between Gabourey. We had a overflow outlet that tied into the pipe that transmits the water to the constructed stormwater wetland. So all the rain gardens, they've been planted. We were having issues with weeds overtaking. I think this fall we've gotten ahead of it, finally got ahead of it. And I think if we keep on it in the spring, we should be in good shape. I think they'll need to be remulched in just the mulch retouched up in the spring. And some of the plants, I think they'll probably have to come around one more time with the plants. But as far as the water treatment in the rain gardens is mostly through the soil matrix anyway, not as much as the vegetation. The vegetation just makes it look, is for appearance purposes for the most part. So the other 4 rain gardens, actually I was talking with John Eric, we are having some issues. Those were all designed for a berm or a sheet, basically a berm sheet flow over top. And there was an issue where they just continuously eroding. We're getting erosion rills with issues with that. So I spoke with John Eric, it was a while ago. And I said, hey, we got these issues. We'd like to, as far as instead of a berm, just have a controlled orifice. So at least we can direct the storm. We don't have this erosion issue picking up sediment. He agreed that was a good fix. So what we've done is we've provided standpipes with the invert at the proper elevation. So you're not, basically they're all designed to hold 8 inches of water. So the standpipes are at a minimum 8 inches above the floor. So you get your stormwater volume held. So that was a minor change as far as the outlets of these structures. But other than that, they're all built. The volumes are per plan, and we're just keeping up with the weeding now. And then one last round of planting, and those will all be set. At this point, I think, Tom, there's still silt sacks in the catch basins.
Yeah, in the bindered areas, we have them in the areas of finished pavement, but under the SWIP, I've said it's okay for them to be removed, except in one area where construction vehicles over finished pavement between Gabourey and the end of Duffy. But yeah, we still do have silt sacks in place.
Yeah. And I think one thing is once the final paving on the 100% of the project area, we'll make sure that, one last go around of all these rain gardens to make sure everything's all square. There's no sediment in them and we're all good to go. So those are all up and running and functioning. So then I guess the final, one item what this plan is showing is the as-built surfaces. Julia requested, I'm not sure if Julia requested that let's tabulate what's going on here based on, there was an original drainage figure as part of the stormwater calculations that showed impervious areas. And she wanted us to tabulate, say, okay, where are we now? So one thing is we are, the roadway and the sidewalks and the driveways were all built as far as square footages per plan. One thing that wasn't accounted for in those calculations were the patios, that we didn't show patios in the back, and also front walks and such. So there is additional impervious areas associated with each lot. So right now we've tabulated the lots that are completed. I believe there's about 8 that are either under construction or currently under construction, yet to be constructed. So the spreadsheet above shows the full tabulation of each lot, the impervious nature of each lot. So when you look at it, the running total, the average impervious surface is 30%. across the project. So if you extrapolate that out, extrapolate that to on the final lots, you'd end up with another 33,410 square feet of impervious surface. So if you tabulate that, we end up with an increase of about 28,000 square feet of impervious surface within our project area. So, that being said, it sounds a lot, but when you take into consideration the size of this drainage area, it's really insignificant. It's 1.7% increase over our project site, and basically 1% increase over, I think it was a little bit like 0.95% over the entire drainage area, contributing to this ILSF. So it really, that increase is insignificant when it comes to the impact of the ILSF. One key item is, okay, that this additional impervious area, it's not roadway, which the road, there's two items. What we have here is we have water quality volume, what the rain gardens and the ivy and the constructed stormwater wetland treat. The impervious surfaces of the roadways and driveways contributing to those treatment facilities has not changed. That's per plan. This additional area is coming from maybe some of the, the aggregate of the buildings might be slightly larger in these patios. So all that water is considered clean. So really this increased impervious area sole impact is on, okay, you got more impervious area, so you get more water going into the bowl, into the ivy, into the isolated land subject to flooding. I did rerun it. So I reran the calculation with this increased amount. And basically you end up with the elevation is a half inch, it is raised by a half inch based on our square foot, our entire square footage of area there of our isolated land subject to flooding areas. So, a half inch is insignificant. We set the basements. I think the basements are set over 2 feet. I think it was 2.3, basically 2.3 feet above the extreme event. So we have, one good thing here is when we went through the design of this, I think everyone was concerned about this. So we were very, very conservative with our approach with this design. So the added impervious area is insignificant, has no impact as far as any potential impact to the homes in their basements. So that's good news as far as that goes. So the other item is this calculation, I ran it on the 8.3. The DEP says to run it at 7. As part of the review, Conservation Commission and the peer review, we are directed to use the higher, more intense rain event of 8.3. So that half inch is based on the extreme rain event. So that's important. The other is more impervious. Yeah, the patios weren't, the patios were missed, but it's no impact on this, on the project. Another item, the key item, one thing is, we talked about it earlier, was that when they were building the pump station, that pump station, we actually provided a new pump station that handles all Boyd Drive. I think it's a great improvement for the city's infrastructure. The existing block one they had was I think they had to go down there daily. They had issues with it. So this new pump station is really an asset for the DPS. But constructing that was an effort. The actual wet well is quite deep. I believe it was around 25 or probably 25 feet, or was the excavation to install that. So there was a substantial dewatering to get to install that. And I believe when I went down there was basically the pumping rate was a 8-inch pipe. It was coming out of the 8-inch pipe. They pumped it into a catch basin. It was coming out of an 8-inch pipe, probably 3/4 full, which is a tremendous flow rate. This was quite a while ago. I said, uh-oh. I said, this is impressive. Like I wanted to know how much water we were going to see getting pumped into our isolated land subject to flooding. And based on my calculation, it was pretty close to 2 back-to-back 100-year events over those 5, I think it was 5 days they were pumping continuously. So I was wondering how deep, I say, oh boy, we're going to get a test of what's going on here. And it never actually achieved the elevation, the 57.5 elevation. I don't think it was even close. The water did come up and connect the IVW to the pond during that time. But it was impressive that, it was a good test to see of our, see our volume and how it would react to this inundation of water, and it performed perfectly. It performed better than expected. So that was.
Yeah, Steve, I GPSed the elevation back then. It was 53.1 or 53.2.
At that peak, yeah. Okay, so that's well under what our projected elevation of 50. Was it 7 not 57.5. That's the 57.5. That's the basement. So what was my peak elevation?
It was 55.
It's 55.2 is the peak elevation. Yeah. What did you say? It was 53 point?
Yeah, 53.1 or 2.
So
GPS is plus or minus a tenth.
So it's all good news. I feel very comfortable with, even with some crazy extreme events, even beyond 8 inches, we're more than covered down there. That the homes will be, the basements won't see water. So that.
So Steve, you also, so you calculated what you did, you reran the calculations with this new estimated amount of total impervious surface, given these as-built conditions. And you also then added an additional 5% on each lot, 5% of each lot onto that again of impervious surface, and then reran the calculation with that increase again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So I ran that again, and it's yeah, I think let's see, let me just go through my notes here. So if everyone would add 5, so yeah, if we added that to the HydroCAD, it's still only
half inch.
Half inch. So then if they increased it to 10%, actually, yeah. So if they increased above the as-built conditions by 1,326 square feet, you'd end up with just about 1 inch. You'd have a 1 inch increase if you went even to 10% of 10% increase of the lot size.
Steve, within all this, I'm under the impression that there's some larger driveways, additional bays and pools and so forth. Is that being considered in this?
Yeah, there was, the pools, so the pools were, well, I think there's one pool out there. The patio deck around that pool they ended up having to construct it as it's a full permeable paver patio. So that entire patio around the pool is permeable paver.
I guess
the pool itself, I believe, I think what happened was, I think he needed to, the pool was considered as impervious, which I don't know, in an ISF, you got 6 inches of freeboard or 5 inches of freeboard. So when it rains, you don't get any water out of the pool until you get more than 6 inches of rain. So if you have a 6-inch rain event, none of it goes to your ILSF.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is not even so much from the drainage aspect of it. It just seems like I can't quite understand why changes are made, pools installed and so forth. Is that, what's the mechanism here? Why are people allowed to?
Steve, if I could, the driveways are constructed as approved. The driveways are exactly as constructed as approved.
Is that correct?
Pardon me?
Yeah. So the driveway, the total area of the driveways, I would say probably within 0.5% are constructed as approved. Yeah, there's some 3 bays. I think we might have had some 3 bays in the plan. I can't remember, but some of the driveways are a little shorter. Some of the driveways are longer. But overall, they're constructed. The overall aggregate area is constructed per plan. You know, Chip, some of the, you know, Chip he catches flack. People want bigger driveways, and now this is the driveway you're gonna get. This is what's on the plan. So.
Although I think that there have been some people who have been moving in and saying, I want a bigger driveway, and they get a bigger driveway.
No, I don't think that's true, Julia. Chip would tell you that that's no. They've asked for bigger driveways and they've not been constructed.
Yeah, we've had people that have asked for bigger driveways, and the answer back to them is that in the plan itself, it says that you can add up to 5% more impervious, but to do that, you have to use that as part of your calculation of that 5%. So the only areas that we had bigger driveways were through that modification that we had to allow up to 7 units to have 3-car garages. So the units that have 3-car garages have a bigger driveway than was originally on the plan, because we didn't have 3-bay garages back then, but we did come back in and get a modification for that. So
From the planning board.
Both, Julia, so we got the modification from the planning board, and then the Conservation Commission approved the HOA that had the modification in it. We could not record the HOA without approval from this board. This commission approved the HOA with that modification in it.
Right, but they're still two separate things. I mean, because the HOA is one thing, allowing the additional 5%, but as we know, the things are getting built without accounting for these increases here and there. So that's just what we're trying to do now, I guess.
So I guess that's a really good segue into the next part of what I wanted to talk about, is that, so we have obviously with the order of conditions, we have the planning board approvals, including the approval of the HOA and including the allowance of these 7 lots with 3-car garages. You might recall, though, in the HOA and in the approval from the planning board allowing the 7 lots with the 3-car garages, those lots are only allowed a 2% increase after construction, as opposed to the rest of the lots, which are allowed a 5% increase. So the planning board took that into consideration when they approved that amendment, and you all took it into consideration when you approved the HOA as well. But the bigger point here, I think, is there have been a lot of discussion, and quite frankly, I think it's confusing and it's hard to keep track of from the planning office's point of view, from your point of view, Julia, Jennifer's point of view, everybody's point of view. How are we keeping track of this? And once we're gone, how do we keep track of it, right? How do you keep track of it when somebody comes in to ask to do a modification? So what we're trying to look at after Steve, because just a week ago, we gave all of you these calculations to understand where all of this is and what the impact is. We're going to propose, as part of our amendment package, something else that works better, that can be managed better in a long term. And I'm going to run it by you and Jennifer before we propose it to anybody, so that we can see, A, that you all get the results you wanted, and B, that whether it's you sitting in your chair or somebody else sitting in your chair, you can easily pull it out and say, oh yeah, you can do that, no problem. And here's the calculation, here's what you're allowed to do. So we're trying to figure that out. Everybody thought that our original methodology was going to be easy, but I don't think in reality it really is. And so I don't know the answer yet, because David, this goes back to your question. What has been approved so far is within the guidelines that we have, but it wasn't easy getting there. And so we don't want to have to go through that process moving forward. We want an easier check and balance.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, because I appreciate you guys working on this and putting this all together. We do need it, and it is going to be complicated moving forward without a clear system for capturing these increases in impervious surface on each lot. So I appreciate that. And I guess the HOA is one thing, the order of conditions is another thing, and that this is it's a big mishmash of provisions in each that sometimes conflict with each other. And so we need to know, for a certificate of compliance, what the changes are on the site. So that's why this is really helpful. We need to know where all the changes in impervious surface are, what that total increase is, how it might or may not have affected the stormwater management system. Regardless of the fact that those increases may be allowed in the HOA, they're not technically allowed under our order of conditions, because the plan that was approved hasn't been amended to reflect those changes yet. Not that it wouldn't be allowed to be amended, but we have to amend it. So I think maybe that leads us into wanting to get an amendment for all this so that we can
Right.
close this thing out cleanly.
Yeah, no, and that's why we're here, because we wanted you all to, we didn't want to just file an amendment and then say, here you go, right? We wanted to have this discussion so you could see where we've been and what we've done. And it took Steve obviously some time to make sure all these calculations were available to everybody and that we knew everything was operating properly. So we are now, after this meeting, in addition to getting the signage done, obviously that's easy, we're going to start working on an amendment and bringing that in. And as to this particular aspect of it, between the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the staff, we're going to run it by you in advance so that you all can see, how it's done and whether it's going to work moving forward and what the impact is, because now we have the base numbers, right? Steve's run these out. We know what they are, run out. We'll run them by John Eric as well. And that's our intent, is to bring in a full amendment to be able to make sure we have a plan moving forward.
Yeah, great. And thanks. And I know John Eric is already reviewing this. I think they're going through this whole system too.
For my edification, once we settle on something here, does the information for each lot go to the building department?
Yeah, they have there is a as-built that is issued to the city and to the homeowner when we get our certificate of occupancy. Is that correct, Chip?
I think that's right, Lisa.
Muted.
Chip, you're muted.
The as-built, right now, what we've done to date is we do an as-built of where the actual building footprint is, and that's what's provided to the owner.
Okay.
Okay, and that's part of our certification to make sure that we're meeting our setbacks and all the rest of it. That's done with the initial survey of the foundation itself. So based on some of the complications that we've had about trying to figure out this percentage and what people want to do, because we do have some people that are looking to want to put a small addition on, or other people were looking to add a pool. We went back and did as-builts on every single lot with what was done on conveyance, right? So that's really where the disconnect was what we provided was an as-built saying, here's where your house is on a certified plot plan, not here's what the conditions were when the property was turned over.
So now you're going to have, so to Joe, to your point, this will be updated, right? Because you're going to have an as-built to get a COC. And this is, we actually have, I mean, this is obviously small, but this is actually an as-built. Like Everett went out and did an as-built of every single lot that was completed. So we actually have that. And so, yes, the city will have this. And that's what we need to figure out, is if we need to provide you a calculation for every lot, because it's all numbers now, right? So we have that, and that may be part of the package that we give you. And we talk about how the amendment works going forward. So that's the thing that we're trying to figure out to make it easier on everybody, including the homeowner.
Yeah, I guess my point was, if if a homeowner decides they want to come in and widen their driveway or something, assuming they get a building permit for it, that there's going to be something there saying that this lot can only increase impervious surface by 2%.
Yep.
Yeah, Joe, we're talking about that in the office right now because all the building permits come upstairs to the zoning enforcement officer, Jennifer Blanchet, and so she would be having to look at that. So and that's why I really appreciate what Lisa said about helping put together some sort of spreadsheet or database or system that we can use moving forward so that we can see what the total allowable increase in impervious surfaces for each lot, so that when someone comes in to add a pathway or a patio or the pool or whatever it is, that we know where they are in those additions, so that when they get to that max, that's it.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, in a much more rudimentary example, is that when Plum Island was done, right, in 2004, there was a list of lots that had candy canes on that were empty that could be built upon. And that list existed. And you could go in and say, is this a pre-existing non-conforming lot? And you knew it. And so the idea is the same, obviously a little more complicated, but the idea is it's as easy as looking at the list to see. That's the idea, to be able to give that to you and to be able to know exactly what that number is.
And we're getting this new online permitting system where you can flag things. So if something comes into the building department, it, you know, we may not be staff, and 20 years from now, something comes into the building department, there can be a flag in the system that then links them to this database or this spreadsheet.
Oh, good. Well. All right, thanks.
So the last thing that's the big thing that is going to take some time, and we're really we really want to get moving on it, is the conservation restriction. So as you know, before we could convey any of the lots out, and before we could actually Chip could even start construction, we had to record the declaration of restriction. And that essentially was all of the prohibitions and allowances regarding all of the open space areas. So that exists online at the Registry of Deeds, and every single lot and every single homeowner is subject to that. So there's no question that that exists. That contemplates the final conservation restriction, which is a little different document. That document has to be approved by DEP, as you know. And so I've provided to you two documents. One is a red line and one is not a red line. It's the document without the red lines. And that's because DEP requires you to show them what changes are made. They expect changes to happen, but they want to know what changes are made in their baseline document. So I've provided that to you. I'm not sure if you want to assign that to somebody to review on your behalf. You know, I don't know if you're going to give it to the city solicitor. What I would like to do is send it off to DEP, to the appropriate entity, because there's essentially one person that reviews all of these for the entire Commonwealth, and it's going to take some time. So, you know, we have to use their form, which we have done. Then we have to use the approved restrictions that were in the declaration of restriction, which we've done. And then a lot of it is kind of around the edges. You know, Tom has described all of the resource areas to be protected and why they need to be protected. So that whole description is in there. So with your authorization, I'd like to simultaneously to you having this, send it on off to DEP so they can start their review, because they're going to come back with comments without question, because that's just what happens. And then when they come back, maybe by the time they come back, you'll have had your review done at the same time, and we can marry the two, because it's going to have to go back again. So I'd like to, with your authorization, go ahead and start that process, and then ask you to send yours off to the city solicitor, whoever you're going to have review it, to do the same thing.
Yeah, I don't have an issue. I don't know if anybody else has an issue with that.
No, it sounds reasonable.
Okay.
I mean, I looked at it, but there could be things in there that I don't have a clue about.
Right.
Well, although that said, I would like, if all the commissioners are reviewing this, and if you have any comments or questions or concerns or whatever, email me and I can incorporate those into our comments and the comments from the city solicitor.
You could maybe you could get Doug to do a volunteer effort and
Wish.
do the review on your behalf, since he was familiar with it and
Maybe.
he reviewed the original declaration of restriction, Julia, and so it's really not far-fetched. And you know, I don't mean to impose anything on Doug here, but
No, I'll ask him. I think that's
Yeah.
a great idea. I'll ask him. He's very familiar with it. And he may,
Yeah.
if he has time, he might take a look
Yeah.
for us.
All right, so that's what we'll do. So our takeaways are this. We're going to start the process for the state review of the CR. We are going to come up with a process of the various amendments related to the impervious surface areas. We will create our amendments to come into the commission with, to the amendment to the order of conditions. And we will finish the signs, a couple of which require review by Julia. And as soon as they're approved, they'll commence installation of those signs.
Okay. And I,
That's
Okay.
a priority for me is getting that, figuring out how to make that connection to the Garrison Trail.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. I apologize. Yeah, and that obviously we need to figure that out. You'll see my photo. See my photo behind me tonight?
Yeah.
That's in the Garrison Trail looking back over the Chain Bridge.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have that's on the list too, obviously. Sorry about that.
Yeah, with a pair of wire cutters and a little bushwhacking, you can do it, but. Better road.
I think, is that how they get to the, that's how they get to the Riverwalk Brewery.
Yeah.
One more minor thing that we didn't cover, but that we covered when we were on our one or two of our site visits, Tom.
Yep.
Is some of the trees that were planted didn't survive, some of the shrubs and
Right.
stuff. And you guys were gonna do like an inventory of what, or let us know, give us a list of what still also just needed to get planted that hadn't been planted yet, and which trees were gonna get replaced and things like that.
So all the plantings went in, but we want to do a health evaluation first thing in the spring. And because there's some that are dead and there's some that, you know, maybe they'll come back in the spring. There's a little bit of growth left on them. So we want to kind of just see.
And I think we should plan a site visit for the whole commission for spring.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. And I, you know, again, I think you'll be pretty happy with what you see. And, you know, so we're going to be going around doing the full assessment on the plants, both in the open space, the rain gardens, all that kind of stuff, getting that done. But the, you know, the one plants that, you know, we talked about during the site visit that we know won't survive, or, you know, one of the things the peer reviewer asked us to do was to put some woody vegetation in that wetland, and it's just turned out to be too wet. There's a couple willows that are still out in there.
Right.
Are alive, but you know, I think we originally intended it for it to be kind of more of a wet meadow, marshy kind of area, and that's kind of what it wants to be. So trying to make it something else turned out to be a challenge. But there's a lot of buffer plants that are there, you know, woody buffer plants that will come in and mature. So those are there. But yeah, no, that's on our list to take care of in the spring.
We thank you for taking the time to go through this tonight.
All right, thank you.
The presentation. All right. Is that it? Anyone from the public want to speak?
If so, I'll give you a minute or two to speak, but you'll have to raise your hand.
Anybody?
No, I see none. All right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank
Yep,
you.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Night.
Nope.
Enjoy the snow.
Looking forward to it.
At least one of us is.
Well, not really. That was a little sarcasm. All right. Talk to you later.
All right,
Bye.
good night. Okay, I guess, well, we do have still the 1176 enforcement, but I don't think we're getting anything for a while, right?
No, and Tom just left, but I looked through the minutes of the last meeting, which was a little while ago. We were expecting a notice of intent from them for the January 5th meeting. So there's a week for them to submit that. I'll check in with Tom after tonight's meeting and see where they stand with that submission.
Are there other items for next week so far, or next hearing so far?
So far, there's only one new item for the meeting on, I guess it's January 5th. We do have something from Michael Steenkamp, 5 Helena Street, that he submitted a notice of intent, but it's not complete, and he hasn't gotten back to me with the rest of the information. So as far as I know, that's not going to be on the agenda unless he gets everything in by next week. It's this 2 Spofford Street certificate of compliance, still waiting for information on that. So no, it doesn't look like it's going to be a really big meeting. I don't see anything on the radar.
Are you going to discuss that other issue, Julie?
Yeah, so another enforcement, actually, we should get back to 8 Nancy Street too, but first, there's an enforcement issue that's come up at 5 Doe Run Drive.
And I am, let me recuse myself first. I'll be sitting here, but you're not going to see me.
Joe's recusing himself because he's in a butter, and he's also the person who informed us about the violation, which is that there's a big wetland back there, behind Doe Run Drive, and we've dealt with Doe Run Drive before. But this particular property owner actually, I guess, came in to see us a year or two ago to put up a fence around their property. You might remember they just wanted a chain link fence. And I don't have the details on the top of my head. I haven't looked up their application yet, but Joe was just telling me about this. They've been doing some cutting back in the wetlands. So they went through, there's a gate and the fence that they installed, which separates their yard from the wetland. They've been going through the gate and cutting down vegetation in the wetland area, which is on their property, but they're not supposed to be going in there. So anyway, we can send them a notice of violation if you would like. Joe tried to speak with them, but didn't have much success. And so anyway, I haven't seen it. I drove by, I wasn't able to see anything from the road or from the driveway areas, but Joe has some photographs taken from the rear of the wetland that do show some piled up cut vegetation.
So you're going to send them something and we're going to get some type of assurance that they're not going to continue doing this while we're reviewing it?
Yeah, I'm hoping it could be as simple as that. It's just to let them know they're not allowed. Apparently it's a new owner. It's not the same people who came to us and then put up the fence. It's someone new who moved in. So they may just not know that they're not allowed to go back there and do that. So I'll just make it a sort of a gentle informational thing maybe first.
Right.
Do we want them to come to our next meeting and perhaps explain the facts of life to them, or? I mean, if we don't hear from them, we don't know what they're going to do.
I know. That's why I'm sort of wondering if maybe the right way to approach it first is, instead of a violation where we say, this has happened, come in and talk to us about it, that we send them an informational, like, we understand this may have been happening in the wetland behind your house. If you are not aware, this is not allowed, please stop. If it continues to happen, then we could have them come into a meeting to talk about it. Joe indicated that they might not speak English very well. So maybe it's something that they just need to be informed about and they can read it and stop.
But I mean, ultimately, we need to find out what was done and what they're going to do to essentially restore conditions.
Yeah, although I don't know. I mean, Joe can maybe provide me some more as his unofficial role as a resident rather than a member of the commission, can provide me some more detail on whether or not he thinks the damage done out there needs mitigation. To me, it looked like it's still fairly heavily vegetated area, and that whatever was cut will likely just grow back pretty quick on its own. But if Joe disagrees and can show me or can show us some more detail, then maybe we do need to require mitigation. I'm not sure. So similar to Nancy Street, I'm gonna maybe have to get some more detail from the abutter on this one because I can't see it myself.
Okay.
But at least send them the informational letter
Yeah.
and say, stop.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll send them a site map of their property. First, I'm going to look up their application from when the fence got put up on the property. I can send them a site plan and let them know that that area behind the fence is wetland and is jurisdictional area that's not to be disturbed. And hopefully that will do the trick. I'll send them references to the Wetlands Protection Act and our ordinance and all that kind of thing. And we'll just see where it goes from there.
Okay.
okay.
And on the 8 Nancy Street thing, where we were in a similar situation of there being an abutter who was sending me photos and indicating that bad things were happening next door along the salt marsh. I put her in touch with the owner of the property who's been renting it, and apparently is this renter who may or may not have been doing something wrong out there. I couldn't tell from aerial photography whether or not there was really any significant damage done. And going out and doing site visits looks like maybe there's some sand and some fill and some rocks that were placed around the house, but it's hard to tell whether those were there before or whether those were new. And the homeowner called me again to let me know that she thinks it's still taking place. And so I went out there again, and honestly, I just don't see anything. So I'm just stuck on that one too. I think it might not be as significant of a violation as the neighbor thinks. She also has issues with street and public way type of stuff, which isn't really our jurisdiction. So that one, I might just try and leave that to the neighbors to work out amongst themselves.
Okay. So 1176, we're not doing anything for that for a while, right?
Next meeting, it's in our minutes from the last meeting. Tom had said that there would be a notice of intent by January 5th. So that needs to be submitted by end of next week to get on that agenda. So that's like Christmas. So I'll get in touch with Tom, see where the things stand on that.
Okay. Do we have anything else?
Nothing.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, Paul Haley,
Yes.
Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
yes.
David Vine,
Yes.
Ron DeCola,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And happy holidays and see you next year.
Okay.
Sounds
You
good.
too.
Bye, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.